understand people going on the street today in Minneapolis, fighting this ICE, believing they're doing something noble. And that's exactly what happened to the Red Guards.
So in the Cultural Revolution, which you lived through, you saw that in real time.
When I was growing up, we were always told our goal is to liberate the humanity.
Xi Van Fleet is a survivor of Mao's Cultural Revolution and co-author of Made in America, The Hidden History of How the U.S. Enabled Communist China and Created Our Greatest Threat.
Because they never understood communism, they made all the possible mistakes and eventually helped the CCP to take over China.
From the founding of the CCP in 1921 to today, she breaks down how America aided the survival and rise of its greatest adversary.
CCP, or communism, is a snake. You can save it, you can help it, but it will bite you because it's nature. The nature is that it's going to destroy you.
This is American Thought Leaders, and I'm Yanya Kellick. Xi Van Fleet, such a pleasure to have you back on American Thought Leaders.
Thank you so much for having me back for the third time.
Well, and you always have incredibly important things to say, and congratulations on your new book, which I will also say is very important and kind of dovetails with the book that I have coming out as well, so I find it particularly poignant. You mentioned something in there that a lot of people don't understand, but I also covered. Totalitarianism is distinct from just your run-of-the-mill authoritarian dictatorship. How is it different?
Yeah, I think this is important because I think a lot of people use it interchangeably, and a lot of people use authoritarianism to describe the CCP. There is a big difference, and I covered that in my book. And so the difference is that authoritarianism is, of course, dictatorship. They demand you do certain things, and they demand that you obey, and mostly leave you alone. Not totalitarianism. A demand not only you obey, but you have to believe in them. That means they have to control your mind. And it's like a religion. So I think that totalitarianism is more like a theocracy, like in Iran, like in China. They absolutely demand that you change your mind. That's called thought reform, and believe their lies. You have to believe. You can't even pretend you believe. They demand that. And that's my experience, my first 26 years experience in China. I think that's important to understand it. CCP and the people running Iran, they are totalitarianism.
You know, this is super interesting because I think that, you know, through pushing this mass propaganda into the system, right? This is something that was a huge lesson to me over the last 10 years, how powerful propaganda can be, that it will change the minds of people. I always thought that people never really accepted propaganda. It was kind of like, people knew that it probably wasn't true, but just kind of were, okay, whatever, we'll run with it because they have all the guns. But no, it actually changes people. Right?
Yeah.
When it's pushed in so hard through the system. And so in the Cultural Revolution, which you lived through, you saw that in real time.
Yeah, and here too, I think I want people to realize wokeism is also totalitarian in nature because it demands that you believe. They demand you believe, not you can't just say, okay, women can be men, but you have to believe it. And they have been very successful in changing people's mind. So it is totalitarian in nature. So that's why the underlying link is communism, Marxism.
Interesting. Well, so a fine point here, okay? I think you're exactly right in that they demand that you believe. But I don't think I still think a lot of people don't quite believe, but they performatively believe. They pretend they believe because, well, it's a lot more convenient. And of course, again, they have all the guns,
Yeah.
right? Or all of the social power, let's say, or a lot of the social powers is the case, say in the West. So that it's an interesting distinction because they demand that you have to believe, but of course, not everybody. Some of it is pretty crazy. So not everybody believes. It's okay to just pretend hard that you believe, right?
It started that way. It's always in the Cultural Revolution. How many people really believe, but they have to pretend? Because not to believe or showing that you doubt, and you're going to end up in gulags or even in execution site. And that is how they run their regime and how they have to do that in order to control your mind.
Just very briefly, before we talk about the details of the book, how did the Cultural Revolution affect you personally?
I really start to think more and more is that I understand, I really do. I understand people going on the street today in Minneapolis, fighting, the eyes believing they're doing something noble. And that's exactly what happened to the Red Guards. You can't say they just totally just have no idea what they're doing. They believe in it. And same thing like here, those radical left, they thought it's something noble. And that's the power of indoctrination. I've seen that. I was one of them, even though I was not really Red Guard, I was too young, but I believed in the lies I was told. I absolutely never doubt. I always believe that the party is always right. The party cannot be wrong. So what I do, believe in the party.
And just very briefly, for those that might be uninitiated, the Red Guard, tell me about who they were.
The Red Guards are the kids. Yeah, during the Cultural Revolution, Mao needed an army to carry out his revolution. And he can't use the army. That looked like a coup because his goal is to take down the CCP. What? CCP? Yes, his goal is to take down the CCP.
Run this by me again. The Mao's goal was to take down the CCP. I hadn't heard that before. Tell me more. Yeah.
Because he believed that he was no longer in control. He believed that his party was somehow not listening to him. So what to do? Get rid of them, all of them, from the central government all the way down to the village level. And so he needs people to do it. He needs an army, and he had an army, and that is tens of millions of Red Guards, the young people. They know nothing, and they can't think critically, and they do one thing really well, follow the order. So they did what Mao wanted them to do, to take down the CCP. They did.
So how did that look like in real life? Like, what did that mean?
Well,
what did these Red Guards actually do?
2020. That's what they did in the Cultural Revolution, like what they did here in America. It's destroy everything, destroy statues, destroy communities, because they're so emboldened. They were backed by people in power. In China, they were backed by Mao. Mao claimed himself to be the Red Commander-in-Chief for the Red Guard. And here, the Democratic Party was behind those mobs, those rioters, those looters, everything. And so you don't have to imagine. You just think about 2020 in Minneapolis and 2026 in Minneapolis. That is what Red Guard looked like.
Well, except that the Red Guard took it to a kind of a whole different level, right? Like I remember there was this three-body problem. Remember there's this series that came out recently, not too long ago, where they really kind of showed what these Red Guards were doing, right? And I was amazed that this landed on Netflix.
I was too.
Yeah.
And yeah. I tweet about it because it's very true to life. That's very close to what happened. So
my point is they were killing people, literally, right?
They were killing people.
Yeah.
And the killing started with the professors, start with their teachers and principals. And so I would say we're not there yet. Very close. Very close. It won't, if we don't stop it, It won't take long for us to get there.
And so what you're saying is this is a combination of indoctrination and sort of the understanding that there's institutional power behind you. The combination of those two things.
Absolutely. So I would think, I think most people probably will agree that Rene Good did not prepare to die. I think he kind of, like many others, probably believed that there's no consequences. So yeah, and they absolutely feel that they are empowered by the Democratic Party and by the people who urged them to go on the street, by the lieutenant governor who urged them to put your body on the line. And many of them probably did not think there's any consequences. Because there's no consequences in 2020, after all those riots, what happened to those people? We don't know, nothing.
So let's go back now to, you did some really interesting research in your book. You're looking way back to even before the time where the Chinese Communist Party took power in 1949 in China, that already there were kind of American interests that were basically supporting it. I did not know about this. Tell me more.
This is I tried to do in my book, to trace all the way back to the beginning. And so, and it really started in the 1800, in the middle of 1800, when a lot of American missionaries or Western missionaries went to China to spread the gospel. At the same time, they also brought with them the idea of democracy, the idea of constitutional government. And it's their work actually fueled the revolution of 1911, which overthrew the Qing dynasty. And in 1912, created the republic, and it's called Republic of China, 1912. And they tried their best. It's imperfect. It's far from being perfect, but it's tried to follow the model of America style government, and it failed, but it survived, and it's still here today. People don't think about it. It's still here today. Republic of China now is in Taiwan, transitioned to a full democracy. So that was the beginning. But what happened? China was on the way to become a really a potential, if I say potential, to be a really a republic, and Asians first, but it was derailed, and that part of the history is just astonishing. And who played that role to derail the whole potential? Woodrow Wilson.
Well, but we know, I mean, let's go before Woodrow Wilson got involved. I mean, the Soviet Comintern was a little bit involved in here. Okay, I mean, I say that glibly, right? But this was a project of the Soviet Union, right?
No, actually, it's the other way around. So the Western ideas came to China around the same time, in the early 1900s, late 1800, and early 1900, and the Enlightenment ideas of democracy, idea of freedom, and among them is also Marxism. But it did not make any traction. People are more drawn to the Western idea, and they call it Mr. De and Mr. Sai, meaning science and democracy. They believe that's what China needed, and that's what will save China and help China to modernize and to be independent from the foreign influence or control of the imperial West. And then something happened. After World War, and the foreign powers got together in Versailles, and that was the Paris peace talk. So China was very hopeful, thinking that they will get the land called the Shandong province back from the Germans. Instead, it went to Japan. And because people are just so hopeful that Woodrow Wilson will help them with their demand, with their rightly cause of getting their land back from Germany. It did not happen, and that turned everything just upside down overnight. The sentiment from pro-America to anti-America, that paved the way for the red tide to sweep through China. That gave the opening to the Russians to come to China, and eventually helped the radicals to form communist groups, and in 1921 officially founded the Communist Party. So it's Russia came second. So
but wouldn't it's a fine point, but they took advantage of an opening.
Exactly.
Right? I mean,
the opening was because Chinese are disillusioned about Western style democracy. That is the really the key point. And so basically set the stage ready for the Russians to come to China and eventually take over.
So well, trace that for me. So now, of course, the Soviets came, they were doing their thing, but it didn't last that long in itself, right? Like basically the Mao and the Chinese took control of the Communist Party at some point pretty quickly, right?
That is a long history. Actually, I think probably it's better to read the book because it's a lot of history. Actually, the Russians not only took over the communists because they helped to found the communists, they also took control of the nationalists. And so because the leader of a nationalist party, Sun Yat-sen, who was considered the founder of Chinese Republic, and so he was looking for help from the West, and everyone turned their back to him. So eventually he said, I have to go to Russia. So because no one was willing to help us. And that at that time, actually, the dominant thought in America is isolationism. It's China, such a vast and a poor continent. Over there, it doesn't really matter to our national interests. It might be right, but they overlooked a very important factor. The Russians are ready to move in, and they did.
Absolutely. So we have two ways now that you explained that sort of America played a role in, bringing us to today, the way the Communist Party rules. There was very early on in America, and frankly in the West writ large, right, a kind of love affair with communism, and something that I've been increasingly learning more and more about as I guess you could call it Lenin's evil genius, an ability to, push very attractive narratives, out into the world, very warm and pleasant sounding propaganda, which was very acceptable to all sorts of people that were, kind of disillusioned with their countries, disillusioned with their governments. And so, it created this whole kind of group of people that were just very sympathetic, even when atrocities started happening. So just to kind of tell me about this whole picture.
Yes, of course. They are very good at find out what is appealing. At that time, what was appealing to the Chinese is nationalism, because they feel like humiliated by the West, by Woodrow Wilson particularly, because they put so much faith in him, believing that he would help China because it's a self-determination, right? It just really encourage everyone. So what they say is that, look, the Western imperialists cannot be trusted, but we'll help you. We'll help you with your struggle against them. And it was just sounds like music to the intellectuals' ears of that time. And so they absolutely said, this is our way out. And so they believe that the Russian Revolution gave them the hope and for China's future.
Explain to me how the nationalists were also somehow, co-opted by the Soviets alongside the Communist Party itself, which was fighting them.
Because Sun Yat-sen could not get any help, and he wanted to.
But like, how did that manifest? Like, what? It makes it sound like Soviets were fighting the Soviets or something, or...
This is very difficult to explain. This will be the first united front. My book, there's a whole chapter covered a lot about united front, which is something that every American should know, a term that every American should be familiar with. But let's go to the beginning. It did not start it now. It started way back. So when the Soviet Union helped to found the Chinese Communist Party, it was very small. It was only 50 members. Guess who were the members? Do you think it's poor peasants or poor workers? The proletariat? No, they were intellectuals. Some professors of Beijing University and their students. They're very small. While nationalists, it's a mature party because they carried out the 1911 revolution that overthrew the Qing dynasty. So what they did is they helped the Nationalist Party, but there was a condition that you have to incorporate the communists. And so basically, their plan was that they let the communists be part of the nationalists and eventually take over from within. And they were almost successful until later the new leader of the nationalists, Chiang Kai-shek, realized the plan. They realized that the communists have been infiltrating the party from within and have been really converted so many nationalists into communists. So in 1927, he made the decision to purge them. And he killed like some 4,000 suspects because they did not know who was who. It was a very, very messy situation. So they killed 4,000, including communists and also some leftist nationalists. And that marked the split of these two. But for us to understand is that that's what Chinese communists do, or communists in general. They are parasites. They absolutely attach themselves to a bigger bigger political force, party or force, and then grow from within, and they are almost successful.
So how does the United Front fit in, and maybe explain what it is?
Yeah, so you can see from the first try that they implemented is work from within, undercover mostly. So it's an infiltration and influence operation. And a lot of the communists joined the nationalists, but only a few on the top were known to the nationalists. Like Mao was one of them. So they knew that the top leaders were communists. But other people, they don't know. So it's really, it's like a work from within, and that's what going on in America is the work from within. You don't know who they are, and it's the influence, and then they leave no trace. A lot of people who were played have no idea that this happened to them, and so.
So that what happened to them?
They absolutely took this stand and become the spokesperson for the CCP, and a lot of them were selling the or giving away the trade secrets, and a lot of them look at the Confucius Institute. what they did is that,
So now we're going back to the present.
yeah,
Okay, right.
yeah. Though I have been talking about the present.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
okay.
So what they do is work from within. So how do the people don't? A lot of people don't know. Okay, so for the Confucian Institute, money was such attractive offer. So a lot of universities let them in. Once you let them in,
Let me just qualify a little bit. So Confucius Institutes, for those that might not be familiar, were basically from China. Institutions connected themselves with university and other educational institutions of America, coming with generous money and also educational materials, and basically creating a partnership, ostensibly with no political orientation, but the reality was quite different.
Yeah. One of the few things is that you cannot talk about Tibet. You cannot talk about Uyghurs. And you cannot criticize CCP. So there goes the free speech. So, but they embed themselves in almost all universities and high schools. And eventually now it's like everywhere. And so that's how they come in from within. And because you want the money, you want the donation. You say, okay, well, it's okay. We don't talk about Hong Kong. We don't talk about Taiwan. But eventually you can talk about a lot of things. And that's how they kill free speech. And that's how they influence the people's mind and think that CCP is just another country, another party.
And it's very interesting, right? Because there's this sort of, when there's this financial relationship, you're also sort of motivated to cover for it because you're getting this benefit, right? Even if you're a little, if there wasn't the financial relationship, you might be a little more suspicious. You wouldn't have so much kind of invested, if you will, right?
Of course.
So it's
greed,
right?
And money and greed will blur people's, people's view of what they're dealing with.
And so, but when the United Front was started, all absolutely had these goal of kind of creating basically a pro-communist United Front among all sorts of people that were not officially communist, right? Basically, that's I think that's where the name or the idea came from, right?
And again, talking about the idea, where it came from Lenin. Yeah, United Front. This idea and this tactic was created by Lenin. And of course, the Soviet taught their students well in China.
Mm-hmm. So the nationalists purge the communists, but we still end up getting the CCP taking over in 1949.
This story is so absolutely fascinating. So after the purge, and the CCP have to withdraw and went to mountains to become really bandits. That's what they are called, red bandits. But they're not going to give up. And that's something we have to learn. Communists do not give up. And Mao famous said, a little spark will start prairie fire. So they have their little so-called Soviet republic in the mountains in southern China, and they started to expand and call themselves basically opposition government, and the Chiang Kai-shek was determined to get rid of them, so he tried 5 encirclement campaign and tried to wipe them out, and the 5th time he was successful and drove the communists out of that area and started what now many people know, the Long March, to escape. And they went westward and eventually ended in northern China, a place called Yan'an. And so from there on, the fight continued, because by then the Japanese started its aggression against China, and totally by accident, also by national demand, they have to start another united front worked together, supposedly, to fight against Japanese. That turned out to be another disaster. And that turned out to be really the cooperation that ended nationalists. And eventually, after Civil War, drove them out of China to Taiwan. So twice they collaborated, and twice the nationalists were deceived and eventually defeated.
And sort of, they had to escape to Taiwan, which is how the Republic of China ended up in Taiwan.
Correct.
Right.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. So, this enemy of the enemy is my friend approach, it doesn't work with communists. That's kind of the message I'm getting here.
Yes,
Yeah.
that was later. That was Nixon. But we still have a little important history to cover, and that was during the World War II.
I guess just to qualify what I mean, right? In this situation, right? Obviously, the nationalists and the communists were not friends, but they got together to fight the Japanese as the common enemy, right? And I wonder to myself, shouldn't that already, after what happened, shouldn't that already have been the lesson?
Exactly.
That the enemy of the enemy, as my friend, doesn't work with communists.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But the history is very complicated. It's not that simple. But my book explains why the nationalists were forced to collaborate with the CCP again. And the same thing happened. They were deceived and defeated. But this took us back to forward, actually, to the 30s and late 30s and early 40s. And now the Americans come on the scene. Why? Because of the common enemy, the Japanese. So now they took us to the late 1930s and early 1940s. And now the Americans reappeared on the scene because now they're forced to engage with China. They had a shared enemy, Imperial Japan. And this period actually was a period that the Americans had a first-hand experience with the CCP. And CCP managed to deceive the Americans and managed to utilize the Americans to defeat their enemy, the nationalists. So the lesson absolutely was never learned, because after this, the same thing happened over and over and over until even today. And so this is why the book is so important, to help people to understand. We were there. When I say we, America was there, and they did not understand communism. And because they never understood communism, they made all the possible mistakes and then helped the CCP to take over China.